Okay, so welcome everybody to this talk. I want to share all the struggle and the problem that we faced, the approach that we followed, and of course also some success. I hope that you all are doing well. And before moving on, I'll introduce myself. I'm Marco Gomiero, and I'm based in Venice. And but I work remotely for Uniware, that is a Berlin-based startup that is working to reinvent how emails work in college. And my background is mainly Android, but during the years I also learned iOS development, and I've done some cross-platform stuff with React Native and Flutter, mostly with Flutter, fortunately for me. And these are my handles if you want to follow me on the web. And let's start with a story. And in this story, there is Alice, that is a mobile developer, and she's working on a newsreader app. And in the feature that she's developing, there is this data class, a simple data class with two fields. And but she realized that things are not working as expected, and the problem seems to be the fact that the author field is nullable, and it should not. So she decided to ask to Bob, that is the backend developer, some information. And Bob says that the documentation says that the author should not be nullable. But of course, things are not working as expected. So Bob decides to give a deeper look. And he finds out that, guess what, there was a problem in the backend, and the author is nullable. And I have another story for you. And this time there is Charlie, that is a product manager. And he asked to Alice to develop a new iOS feature. And this feature is the same that she has already developed on Android. And for Alice, it's not a problem at all, because she knows both the platform. But she soon realized that apart from UI code, she's just translating Kotlin into Swift, and this is a boring stuff. So I can bet that this true story happened to you at least once in your career. Maybe the first one, because the second one is more related to small teams and maybe startups. But both the episode have a common theme. And this theme is execution speed. In fact, both in small and large team, we don't have an infinite amount of time to develop a feature. And it would be great if we can reduce this execution time, if we are able to reduce the time that we spend to develop the same feature on both the platform. And also if we can reduce the amount of bugs that can be present with this feature. And if we are not writing 2 times the same boring code, there will be fewer bugs, because boring code led to bugs. This is a law. But how to tackle this situation? Well, we can go with classic cross-platform solution like React Native and Flutter. And for example, at Uniware back in the days, we decided to develop a new feature with React Native. And but we soon realized that that this was not a good idea, because this new feature was integrated inside the existing native application, and this thing led to performance issue, especially on Android. This was a project-specific problem, but the main problem with this cross-platform solution is the fact that they are trying to unify the UI declaration between different platforms. And unifying things that is born differently is difficult, because different things have different patterns, have different ideas, have different structure. And if we want to unify these two different worlds, we need to make some compromises. And not always these compromises are a good thing. And how we can avoid making these compromises? Well, with Kotlin Multiplatform. And that's because Kotlin Multiplatform is not about compiling all the code for all the platform, but only the part of the code that is not UI related. So we can share all the business logic or some small parts of it, for example, only the persistent layer or the network layer, or only some utility methods. The ground rule is share everything that is not UI. Okay, these seem very good, very promising, but how to approach it in existing projects? Well, in most of the cases, you are starting from an existing project with an existing structure, existing architecture, existing repository, and so on and so forth. And plus, you don't have time to do a big rewrite of your existing stuff, usually. And so, for example, you don't have time to bring all your repository and create, for example, the same monorepo like the one you see in the sample of Kotlin Multiplatform in the web, because simply you don't have enough time, or because there could be also some constraint, some management constraint on it. So, for example, the backend is used and developed by an external team or other things, and this could be a constraint to avoid having a monorepo. But fortunately, in software development, we can use a piece of code that someone else wrote, or even ourselves wrote, and we can integrate it in our project as a library. And so now we can choose a little piece of tech stack to start with, and we can migrate it to Kotlin Multiplatform and integrate it in our existing project. But where to start in reality? Well, this little piece of tech stack can be some boring code some code that is boring to write multiple times, because, you know, as I said before, if it's boring to write and if you write twice, we can make errors. It's a law. And or we can start from a feature or again piece of code that centralizes the source of truth, because in this way, with a single source of truth, we have also a single point of failure. So, for example, we can put in one place the fact that the information that a single field is nullable, like the data class that I told you during the story, or, for example, some variables or some constants. And that because if there is an error, there is only one place to go and fix. And, for example, and all this part of feature and code must be part that can be gradually extracted, because you cannot start with, for example, your entire network layer, because you don't know yet if a Kotlin Multiplatform is a right solution for you. And so if you spend an infinite amount of time to move the entire network layer, and then you realize that Kotlin Multiplatform was not a solution for you, you have wasted a lot of time. But instead, if you start from a little bit, from maybe a single class, then if the idea that you are trying to achieve is correct, you can add a lot of things. Okay, but in reality, what are these examples? Where, for example, you can start from DTOs, or you can start from common data models, or you can start from the utility methods that every project have. And at Univer, we decided to start from DTOs. And now you can understand why I told you the first story. And okay, so now let's start building something. And all the code that you're going to see in the slide is extracted from a sample that I wrote and that I've published already on GitHub. So you can check out and play with it. And basically, this project is composed by a backend written with Ktor, a backend that serves a list of news from a kernel user. And then there is an Android client and an iOS client to read that news. And these three projects shares a common library that is called Foundation, that contains the DTOs that they are using. So let's start building it. And let's start by building our HN Foundation library. So let's start by creating a new project, and we can do it by, and I've done it with the wizard provided by IntelliJ that let us create a mobile library with the iOS and the Android target. And I not already have checked if you can do this with the Android Studio plugin. I have to investigate it. But I can say to you that this wizard has been improved a lot with the 1.4 release. So now it's more easy to use. Okay, so now that we have a project, we need to add the JVM target, of course, if we need it. And to add it, we need, I preferred to add it and to differentiate between Android and the JVM, because if I need a specific Android things in the future, always is already set it up. And now we need to decide how to publish our artifacts. And I've decided to do with a Maven repository, so I've used the Maven Publish plugin for Gradle. All right, so now after some DevOps stuff, let's write some code. And all the code that we need to write is this simple data class with a bunch of fields that we need to in our project. And that's it basically for the HN Foundation project. Now we can publish it on our Maven repository, but for this sample, I've used a local Maven repository because it was overkill to create a remote repository for a sample. And now it's finally time to add the library to the backend and to the clients. So let's start. And next, we can use that dependency in our network call. And basically, that's it for the Android client. Of course, if you want to have the complete code, you can look in the GitHub repository. And for the backend, we have to define, again, the dependency, and you can do it with the usual implementation line on the build.gradle file, of course, if you are using Gradle. And with the Ktor, we can define and expose an endpoint that responds and serves our news. And basically, that's it. We have now a working Android client and a working backend that shares the same little piece of code. And what about iOS? Well, on iOS, things are harder and are more complicated. But let's see why. And first of all, in the iOS world, the equivalent of the JAR and the AAR is the framework. And the framework can be distributed with different dependency managers that are basically the same of the EMEA repository. And these dependency managers are Cocoa Pods, Carthage, or the Swift Package Manager. And the code that we write on when we create a Kotlin Multiplatform project. And this task is called by Xcode automatically when we hit the run button. And these three variables real devices. These fields are decided. Multi-platform project.
Integration is testing also the when you build it and you follow the steps to platform dependency as one of
the mode will be archive to create an archive for publishing in the Apple Store. The mode will be released and the target name will be ARM64. And so we cannot use this task for creating a framework to be used by external application because we don't know a priori the configuration and the target name. So this path was closed for me. So I switched to another path and I tried the Cocoa Pod plugin by JetBrains that basically creates a Cocoa Pod repository with inside the framework. But again, there was the same problem because this plugin creates a script that is called by Xcode, and again, the target, the configuration is defined at runtime. So another close path for me. So that was a bit problematic. And how to do it? Well, fortunately, there are the FAT framework. And publish it. So this it was a good idea to follow. And in fact, there is also a Gradle task to create a FAT framework. So we can create our task and our task to build the things. And so I've created a task to build the debug framework. And in this case, we need to define the architecture that we want, and of course the configuration. a pod spec. That is basically a file that defines how the CocoaPod repository is built. So we need to specify the name, the version, the Git repository, and so on and so forth. I'm not going deeper on this argument, but I leave for you a reference on the CocoaPod website that is a tutorial, a very well-made tutorial that explains all. We can say to our iOS project to use that library. And this is the same of saying implementation, blah, 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 on the Gradle file. And in this case, we are telling to Xcode that we want to use the HM Foundation library that can be found on a specific Git repository. And for this case, you have to use the developer branch. And for you, in this case, I mean Xcode. And I've specified a develop branch because these are the for the developer cycles, because you need to iterate quickly. But for the final releases, I suggest you to specify a tag because you will be able to understand and use a specific version. Okay, so I have to build a framework, put it in a repository, update the framework, and for publishing a release framework. They are basically the same with a little bit of differences. And for the developer one, I use the develop branch of the CocoaPod repository. And next, after building the for the production release, I do basically the same exact things, except for the fact that I use the master branch of the CocoaPod repository, and except for the fact that now I tag the commit the feature on iOS. And no, because there are some other problems. And this problem is basically on the serialization. And this is more, let's say, project specific on the choices that I've made. But I wanted to tell you anyway. And because basically on iOS, the serialization don't work out of the box like on Android. Because on Android, for example, if we are using JSON, for example, but on iOS, no. And on iOS, you are probably using a LAMO file for the network calls, that is the equivalent of retrofit. And for handling the serialization, you are probably using Codable or the Codable solution by Apple, or other open source solution like Object Mapper, because Apple came later with the Codable support. And of course, the community have developed something to be able to use. And we are using Object Mapper for this reason. And to make the serialization work, you need to implement the decodable interface if you are using the codable solution, or the mappable interface that in the iOS world, the interface is named protocol. It's a little bit different, but it's the same concept. And for Object Mapper, you need to comply to the mappable protocol. All right, again, I'm not going deep on the codable and Object Mapper argument, but I leave for you, if you are interested, some reference. And so let's comply to the decodable protocol. And to do it, we need to define a new object that have to define basically a secondary constructor that initialize with some default values the news DTO, and next tell to Swift how every field can be open, and all the fields are immutable, so we can do that. And third thing, that is not so a problem, we don't have an empty constructor, but of course we can define here of course you can do it. You can do that. And so we need to move back to Kotlin Multiplatform and edit a little bit our DTO and switch from data class to open class, from val to var. And we need also to override the hash code and the equals if we need. And we can define also an empty constructor, so things. So we have in one place what the default value of this field should be. All right, so finally, we can use our DTO to be deserialized in our network call. So we are all happy with run, and spam right in our face a beautiful exception. And this is an exception that you will see a lot on Kotlin Multiplatform if you are dealing with the different threads. And because the network call is done in a background thread, and next we are trying to access this the useDTO object that is defined on Kotlin Multiplatform in a background thread, and we can't share on Kotlin native classes between threads if this class is mutable. And this is because Kotlin native have a different concurrency model, and I'm not going deep on it right now because it's a tough argument, let's say. But I leave for you a reference, and I suggest you to give a look to this talk by Kevin Gelligan at the Kotlin Conf that explain very well the topic. Or if you don't want to watch a talk, I give you a series of articles that Kevin wrote about the argument, and both the solution, both the talk and the different thread in Kotlin Multiplatform if we froze that class. And by freeze this the class, I mean making it immutable. And we can do it. And of course, if we froze it, we can't modify the fields anymore. because the frozen method also on the common target. So you can use it in the common target, and if that code is used on Android, it does nothing because because it's not necessary to frosting on the JVM. Instead, if it's doing stuff on Kotlin native on iOS, for example, it does what it needs to do. So we need to go back to Kotlin Multiplatform and make some changes, and we need to provide the possibility to froze that class. And in this case, I've done a base class to cover all the DTOs in one shot. Next, we can come back to iOS and froze the DTO after initializing all the fields. And basically, was a tough journey, I know. We have faced a lot of difficulties and a lot of problems, but fortunately we have succeeded in achieving what we want. And this let's summarize a bit these difficulties. And the first one was how to organize the project without a monorepo structure. And this was a difficult task because I wasn't able to find any example or any sample or any proper documentation on to that I've decided to do this talk and to write a sample, you know, to give back to give back to the community. And another problem that I faced is Gradle, because you know there are always problems with Gradle. But besides jokes, I was not a Gradle hero before, and neither now. But to use Kotlin Multiplatform, I needed to write some task, to write some Gradle code that I was not super confident with it, but with a bit of research and sweat, I managed to. And another problem that is related with the first one is how to distribute effectively the iOS framework. This was a very hard problem to face, but fortunately, with a lot of sweat and blood, we managed to achieve it, and this was a very successful and satisfying task to do it at the end, not at the beginning. And again, it was difficult because there wasn't any guide outside in the world, because everything was easy with a monorepo structure, and everything worked out of the box with a monorepo structure. So we needed to dig around to research a bit. And the final problem that is more project specific, but I wanted to say it anyway, because maybe also with your project you are going to face it, is to handle the serialization on iOS. And again, this was a tough task for me, but with the blood and sweat that we saved for the third difficult, we managed to achieve it. And so after all these difficulties, I've extracted a pattern to follow if you want to start with a Kotlin Multiplatform. And this pattern says that you need to start little and only then go bigger, because you have to validate the process. And if you have to validate the process, you can't start by extracting all the network layer, for example, because otherwise you will spend a huge amount of time to doing the migration. And then maybe you realize that the Kotlin Multiplatform way is not the right way for you. And so, and also, as you have already seen in this talk, you will spend a lot of time doing, let's call it DevOps things. So how to distribute, archive, and so on and so forth to publish and use your library. So if you start little and you start doing things and you choose a little thing to extract, you can validate your process with little effort. And then when you have validated the process, you can go bigger and start adding more features. And that the thing that we've done at Univer, we started with the DTOs. We have seen that things are working And Kotlin Multiplatform was a great solution for us. So we decided to go bigger, and we started to share all the entire for all, and it's all shared. And we are very happy with this choice. And basically that's it. Here I have left for you some reference that I've used for preparing this talk, and also for taking ideas. So give a look if you're interested. And basically that's it. Thank you very much for the attention. If you need some if you have some question, I'm here to answer if we have time, and if we don't have time, you can always reach me on my social or in the platform. All right, so let's see the questions. All right. One guy is asking, there is a new plugin for Android Studio to create Kotlin Multiplatform application. You can build a iOS app directly to Android Studio. Yes, and I've tried. But again, this is for a monorepo structure, and it's it makes things easy for you, but only if you are starting from scratch. And I've used this plugin because I'm starting also a little side project from scratch, and I'm happy with the monorepo structure. But for existing project, there are, as I said, different constraints. All right, next question. For DBs SQLite for network Ktor, yes, and for DBs we are very happy with SQLite. I've not tried yet Ktor because moving the entire network layer, it is a tough job. So maybe in the future we definitely do it. Okay, next question. What about using shared DBs and network libs? It is supported. Are there plans to do so? If not, like the previous question, for shared DB, you can use SQLite, and this is very, very supported, and it works very well. I'm very satisfied with it. And for networking libs, there is Ktor. I've used a year ago for a side project, so I'm not super informed about it, but there is, and it works well. Next one. Kotlin Multiplatform is out of alpha. Do you advise to use in a production project? Is not out of alpha. Is in alpha right now. But yes, if we are using in a production project, and I suggest to do it. But I suggest you to do it even if you know what you are doing, and I mean. You know that is in alpha, so maybe there are things that you need to fix. Something cannot work as expected, but the overall experience was good for us. And of course, it depends on the project. All right. Next, another guy is suggesting a library list for the Kotlin Multiplatform library, and I suggest it as well. That it's a very useful one single source of truth for Kotlin Multiplatform library. Is there a dependency injection framework you can share between Android and iOS currently? Yes, there is Kotlin, I guess. Or the other one that I didn't remember the name. That a flash. But there are one solution. It's still in alpha, and I started using it. Is this talk going to be available online later to watch properly? Lots of connection issue during your very interesting talk. I'm sorry that was a connection issue. I think that it will be available, but maybe someone else for the staff can answer. But I guess yes. Another question, since Kotlin Multiplatform is still in alpha, do you think it is stable enough to use in production project? I've kind of already answered to it, and yes, I think that you can use in production, even if you have to take in mind that things maybe cannot work because you are in alpha, but it's ready to use. You mentioned in your story that the backend and frontend have to agree on property nullability. What about always assuming nullability in your DTOs? That was, you have a robust app. Yes, you could. Well, it depends on how your project is structured, but I think that if a field is thought to be not nullable, it's not a good idea to assume it nullable. I mean, if you know for sure that in the database this is not null, I put it. I'm not putting it nullable on the DTOs. Okay. Coin was the one of the dependency injection framework. Sorry, I wasn't remember right now. Summary, good or bad? Bad. I am not going to explain why, because she's I was asked for a short answer. Can I use Flutter to do some UI stuff inside a Kotlin multi-platform project? Probably you can, but I think that it will be a huge tool chain to be able to maintain, but I think that you can do it. Next, could you post your social in the chat, please? Yes, I don't know. Yes, next I do it, or you can find, or I will post it in the platform. Next, if we implement separate UIs with cross-platform frameworks like Flutter, do you still believe that Kotlin Multiplatform would be a better choice? Well, if you are going, well, it depends on which things you can choose. If you're starting, let's say, from scratch with an MVP, for example, I suggest you to go with a cross-platform like Flutter, because you don't have, you have to first validate your idea that works in the market. And then after some times, if you find that the cross-platform solution is not worth, because you are scaling you are scaling so fast and you have problems and stuff like that, you can move to a native solution with the Kotlin Multiplatform. But of course, this is a tough argument to summarize, because it depends a lot on your project and is project specific. But I think that both are valuable solution. Depends on the project. Could you share the link of the project? Yes, of course. I will share the slide on my Twitter account. I will share it in the platform and whatever, and in every place I can share it. Why is summary so bad? Short explanation. Well, because it has not such. I've not found such a great community. I mean, a big community on it, and I don't like so much C# and stuff like that. I prefer other. But if you are fine to use Xamarin, of course you can use it. I'm not judging you. Of course. Okay, I can't see any questions. Oh, okay, there are another one. Do you think in the future something like Composer would work with Kotlin Multiplatform and provide the UI for it? Yes, I think so. Maybe there will be something upporting or stuff like that on Composer for the Kotlin Multiplatform stuff. And maybe some UI can work. Maybe the problem will be on iOS side a bit. But if you're doing some Android and maybe desktop stuff, I think that I'm confident that in the future there will be the possibility to use Compose. Of course, I don't know for sure, but I hope so. Thank you very much to everybody to have choose this talk. If you have any question, you can reach me out on Twitter, and my handle is like my name but without the final O. And of course, I will share the slide and stuff around. And so, thank you. And also, you can reach me out in the platform. So, thank you again. Bye.